Julien Moreau spent 12 years in Paris metro tunnels 300 feet underground. When the Seine burst its banks, he was at Châtelet when the flood hit, a black wall killing the lights in seconds. Trapped with water rising fast and air running out, his only escape was an old German vent into forgotten catacombs where resistance fighters once hid. With no food, no light, and 6 million skeletal remains in the darkness, he had 72 hours to find a way out. This is one of the most remarkable underground survival stories ever told. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The maintenance office at 6:47 that morning smelled like burnt coffee and wet concrete. Julien clipped his radio to his belt and checked the weather alerts scrolling across Bernard's computer screen. Seine levels climbing, storm warnings for the next 18 hours, flash flood watches across the city. Bernard looked up from his desk, steam rising from his cup. "You see this mess?" "Seen worse," Julien said. He grabbed his tool bag from the locker, checking contents by habit: flashlight, multimeter, water sensor, channel locks. Everything in its place after 12 years of the same routine. They're saying this could be bad, like 1910 bad. Julien shrugged into his work jacket. The metro survived 1910. It'll survive this. He'd inspected every junction, every service tunnel, every emergency access point on Line 4. The system was built to handle water. Pumps would kick in. Drainage channels would do their job. Antoine pushed through the door, shaking rain from his hair. 23 years old and still excited about maintenance work. "Crazy out there, streets are already flooding near the river." "Get your gear," Bernard said. "I want you both doing quick checks on the Châtelet junctions. Nothing thorough. Just eyeball the sensors and get back up here by 10. Julien poured the last of the coffee into a thermos. His daughter Sophie had given it to him 3 Christmases ago, covered in stickers she'd picked out. Papa's fuel written in her handwriting across the side. She'd be at school by now, probably staring out the window at the rain instead of paying attention to her math teacher. "You worried?" Antoine asked as they headed for the service elevator. "About what?" "The storm, the flooding." Julien pressed the button marked B3. "I've been down there in worse conditions. Water finds its way in sometimes. That's why we check." The elevator descended with a mechanical groan, dropping them past the passenger platforms, past the equipment levels, down into the maintenance tunnels where the real infrastructure lived. The temperature dropped 10 degrees between the surface and the deep tunnels. Julien's breath misted in the beam of his flashlight as they walked the access corridor toward Châtelet. Water dripped from overhead pipes, pooling in the worn grooves of the concrete floor. Normal. Everything looked normal. "You ever find anything weird down here?" Antoine played his light across the walls. "Like old stuff from when they built this. Found a boot once from the 40s. Still had the foot in it." Antoine stopped walking. Seriously. Julien checked his watch. 7:15. Construction accidents, cave-ins. People have died building these tunnels. Some of them are still here. He pointed to a section of wall where faint German text had been painted decades ago. "Notausgang, emergency exit. The Nazis used some of these service tunnels during the occupation." "That's creepy. That's history." Julien moved on, following the main line toward the junction point. His radio crackled with chatter from other crews checking their assigned sections. Everyone reporting normal conditions, water levels elevated but manageable, pumps operating within parameters. He had no reason to think this day would be different from any other. The junction chamber sat 250 feet below street level, where 3 old tunnel systems converged into a maze of concrete and rusted iron. Julien's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, reflecting off standing water that covered the floor ankle deep. More than usual, but not alarming, not yet. He pulled out his water sensor and crouched at the edge of a drainage channel. The digital readout flickered to life. Flow rate elevated, pressure building in the feeder lines. Still within acceptable range, but climbing. "Should we report this?" Antoine stood at the tunnel entrance, playing his light across the curved ceiling where condensation dripped steady as a heartbeat. "I'm logging it. Julien keyed his radio. Bernard, this is Moreau. Châtelet Junction showing elevated moisture. Sensors reading green, but we've got more standing water than normal. Static crackled. Bernard's voice came through broken and distant. Copy that. Finish your sweep and head back. They're talking about shutting down service if this keeps up. Julien moved deeper into the junction, checking the valve controls that regulated water flow between sections. Everything looked secure. The old German text appeared again on the eastern wall, barely visible under decades of grime and mineral deposits. He'd seen it 100 times before and never paid much attention. Emergency exit, probably sealed up 70 years ago when they renovated this section. His boots splashed through water that now reached his shins. In the 5 minutes since they had entered the chamber, the level had risen 3 inches. That wasn't normal. Antoine, check the western pump station. Make sure it's running. The kid disappeared down a side passage. Julien traced the water sensor along the walls, following the moisture readings. They spiked near a sealed access panel he'd never had reason to open. The metal was cold under his palm, vibrating slightly. Something behind it. Pressure, movement. The radio erupted with overlapping voices. Crews from other sections reporting rapidly rising water. Someone shouting about a pump failure near Seine. Bernard's voice cutting through, ordering immediate evacuation of all below-ground personnel. Antoine. Julien turned toward the western tunnel. We're leaving. Now. A sound like thunder rolled through the chamber. Not from above, from below. From the sealed tunnels that carried runoff from the Seine. Julien had heard that sound once before, 15 years ago during a controlled water release. But this wasn't controlled. This was the river finding a way in. Antoine appeared in the tunnel mouth, eyes wide. The pump station's flooded. Water's pouring through the access shaft. Move! Julien grabbed his tool bag and headed for the exit ladder. The water was at his knees now, rising visibly with each passing second. Cold, dark, carrying debris from somewhere upstream. They reached the ladder. Julien pushed Antoine ahead of him. Climb! Don't stop! The kid scrambled up the iron rungs toward the equipment level, 3 stories above. Julien followed, his boots heavy with water. Behind them, the junction chamber filled with a roar that sounded like the end of the world arriving right on schedule. Julien reached the equipment level platform just as the lights went out. Complete darkness, the kind that makes you question whether your eyes are even open. Antoine's breathing came fast and panicked somewhere ahead. Stay still, Julien said. He fumbled for his flashlight, fingers clumsy with cold. The beam clicked on, showing Antoine pressed against the concrete wall, water dripping from his hair and jacket. The roar below them intensified. Julien leaned over the platform edge and aimed his light down the shaft. Water surged up the ladder they just climbed, black and churning, already halfway to their position, rising faster than any pump failure could explain. The Seine broke through. He said it out loud to make it real. One of the containment walls gave way. We need to get topside, Antoine's voice cracked. Right now. Julien swept his light across the equipment level. 2 exits. The main access tunnel leading back toward the service elevator and a narrow maintenance corridor that connected to the northern emergency shaft. He keyed his radio. Bernard, do you copy? Bernard? Nothing but static. He tried again. Any unit, this is Moreau at Châtelet. We have catastrophic flooding. Requesting immediate... The radio cut out completely. Dead. Either the water had knocked out the repeaters, or the entire power grid below ground had failed. Which way? Antoine moved toward the main tunnel. Wait. Julien grabbed his arm. The main tunnel sloped downward for 50 meters before climbing back up to the elevator shaft. If water was filling the system this fast, that low section would be completely submerged. They'd be swimming blind through flooded passage with no guarantee the elevator was even accessible. The emergency shaft meant climbing. 300 feet straight up through a ladder shaft, barely wide enough for shoulders. But it was their best shot. A grinding crash echoed from the direction of the main tunnel. The sound of something massive giving way. Tons of concrete and metal collapsing under hydraulic pressure. The water below their platform surged upward another 10 feet, close enough now that Julien could feel the spray. Emergency shaft, go! They ran through the equipment level, past silent pump stations and dead control panels, toward the northern corridor. Julien's flashlight beam bounced off pipes and cable runs overhead. The floor tilted slightly upward. Good. Every foot of elevation bought them time. The emergency shaft door stood closed but unlocked. Julien hauled it open and shone his light into the vertical tunnel. Iron rungs disappeared into darkness above and below. The climb would be brutal, but they'd make it. They had to. Antoine stepped toward the ladder. The floor beneath him exploded upward. Water erupted through the concrete in a geyser of pressure and debris. The blast threw Antoine backward into Julien, both of them slamming against the corridor wall. Julien's flashlight flew from his hand, clattering across the floor and spinning its beam in crazy circles. When he grabbed it again, the emergency shaft was completely flooded. Water poured from the open door like a horizontal waterfall, turning the corridor into a river. Their way out had just disappeared, and behind them, the equipment level was going under fast. Julien hauled Antoine to his feet. Water swirled around their calves, rising with each second. The kid's eyes were wild, darting between the flooded emergency shaft and the corridor, filling behind them. "We're trapped." Antoine's voice came out high and thin. "We're going to drown down here." "No." Julien gripped his shoulder hard. "We're not. Move." He pulled Antoine back the way they'd come, away from the gushing shaft, toward the junction chamber they'd fled minutes earlier. Bad options were still options. The water chased them through the equipment level, ankle deep, then shin deep, carrying floating debris that bumped against their legs in the darkness. His mind raced through the tunnel layout. 12 years of walking these passages, memorizing every connection, every sealed door, every forgotten access point. There had to be something. Some route the water hadn't found yet. The junction chamber was a lake now. Their earlier work platform sat underwater. Only the highest point remained above the flood, a concrete ledge where old valve controls jutted from the wall. Julien and Antoine climbed onto it, pressed against cold stone, watching the water creep higher. "Check your phone," Julien said. Antoine pulled out a soaked device. Water dripped from the screen. "Dead, yours." Julien's was in his tool bag, sealed in a waterproof pocket. He fished it out. No signal this deep, but the screen glowed. 43% battery. He opened the flashlight app for extra light, propped it on the ledge. The water sensor in his bag was still working. He checked the readings. Rise rate, 18 inches per hour. Steady, relentless. At this rate, their ledge would be underwater in 4 hours. Maybe less if more containment walls failed. "We can't stay here," Antoine stared at the rising water. 4 hours and we're swimming." "I know." Julien played his flashlight across the walls, looking for anything he'd missed in 12 years. The beam caught the German text again. "No towels, gang. Emergency exit." He'd always assumed it was just historical graffiti, a relic from the occupation. But what if it wasn't? He waded back into the water, now waist deep, and moved toward the eastern wall. His hands traced the concrete around the faded text, feeling for irregularities. Nothing but solid wall. Then his fingers found it. A seam. Barely visible under decades of paint and grime, but definitely there. A rectangular outline, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet. He scraped away the buildup with his multimeter, revealing rusted metal underneath. "Antoine, bring the channel locks from my bag." The kid splashed over with the tool. Together they worked the edges of what was clearly a sealed hatch. Paint and rust had welded it shut, but the metal beneath was thin. Old. Julien wedged the channel locks into the seam and threw his weight against the handles. The seal cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Air hissed from the opening. Stale, ancient, but moving. A draft, which meant the space behind this hatch connected to somewhere. They pried harder. The hatch groaned and finally swung inward on corroded hinges, revealing a vertical shaft climbing into darkness. Iron rungs disappeared upward. German markings covered the walls. "What is this?" Antoine aimed his light up the shaft. "Our way out," Julien said. He hoped. Julien tested the first rung. Rust flaked under his grip, but the metal held. He pulled himself up, boots scraping against the shaft wall. The space was narrow, barely wider than his shoulders. Water dripped from somewhere above, running down the walls in cold streams. Antoine climbed behind him, his flashlight beam dancing across German text painted at intervals. Julien recognized some of the words from his grandfather's stories about the occupation. Vorsicht, caution, Wasserstand, water level. These weren't just markings, they were warnings. How high does this go? Antoine's voice echoed in the confined space. Don't know. Julien kept climbing. His shoulders brushed both walls with each movement. The rungs were spaced awkwardly, built for different-sized men 70 years ago. His thighs burned after 20 rungs. 40, 60. He stopped to catch his breath. Below, the water had found the hatch they'd opened. It poured through the opening, starting to fill the shaft from the bottom. The sound echoed upward, a steady rushing that meant they couldn't go back even if they wanted to. It's following us, Antoine said. Then we climb faster. Julien pulled himself up another rung. The metal was slick with condensation and years of accumulated moisture. His hands were already cramping from gripping so hard. At 80 rungs, his flashlight beam caught something above. A platform, small, maybe 6 feet square, with a horizontal passage leading off into darkness. He hauled himself onto it, then reached down to help Antoine up. They collapsed against the wall, gasping. Julien's legs shook from the climb. He checked his phone. Still no signal. Battery down to 38%. He'd been using it for light too liberally. The horizontal passage stretched ahead, low-ceilinged and narrow. Julien had to duck to enter it. The walls here were different. Older limestone instead of concrete. Carved by hand, not poured. He recognized the construction style from tours he'd taken of the Paris catacombs years ago. We're in the ossuary system, he said. The what? The catacombs. Old limestone quarries. They moved millions of bones down here in the 1700s when the cemeteries got too full. He swept his light across the walls. No bones visible here, but the passage had that unmistakable look of the ancient tunnels that honeycombed the ground beneath Paris. The German markings continued, arrows painted on the walls, numbers, cryptic abbreviations. Someone had used these passages extensively during the war. Resistance fighters hiding from Nazi patrols? Or maybe the Nazis themselves, using the catacombs to move through the city unseen. The passage split into 3 directions. No markings indicating which way to go. Julien played his light down each tunnel. They all looked identical. Narrow, dark, sloping slightly but impossible to tell if up or down without a level. Which one? Antoine stood at the junction, turning in circles. Behind them, water began spilling onto the platform they'd just left. The flood was climbing faster than they were. The shaft had become a chimney for the rising water, pressure forcing it upward through any available space. Julien studied the junction again. One tunnel had scratches on the wall near the entrance. Not painted markings. Scratched into the stone with something sharp, deliberate, recent enough that the limestone hadn't weathered smooth again. Someone had marked this passage. Maybe decades ago, maybe recently. Either way, it was more information than the other 2 tunnels offered. This way. He entered the marked tunnel. How do you know? I don't, Julien said. But standing still means drowning. The tunnel ceiling dropped so low Julien had to crawl. His knees scraped against rough limestone. His tool bag dragged behind him, catching on every irregularity in the floor. Antoine followed close enough that Julien could hear the kids breathing, fast and shallow. The scratch marks appeared every 20 feet. Simple symbols, arrows, crosses, lines. Someone had mapped this route deliberately. Julien's grandfather had told stories about resistance fighters using the catacombs during the occupation. Secret supply routes, hiding places for weapons and ammunition. Escape tunnels that led from Nazi headquarters to safe houses across the city. Maybe these marks were that old, maybe older. The tunnel opened into a chamber filled with bones, skulls stacked in neat rows along the walls, femurs arranged in geometric patterns between them. Thousands of dead Parisians moved here centuries ago, watching them pass with empty eye sockets. Jesus Christ. Antoine stopped moving. Keep going. Julien crossed the chamber quickly. He'd seen the catacombs before, taken the official tour with Sophie when she was 10. But that had been sanitized, well lit, with tour guides explaining the history. This was different. This was the forbidden sections, the unmapped passages where tourists never went. The marks led them through 2 more bone chambers and into a passage that climbed steeply upward. Good. Up meant away from the flood. Up meant closer to the surface. Julien's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, hope spiking. Still no signal, but the vibration meant something was trying to connect. They were getting closer to the surface network. The passage ended at a wall, solid limestone. No openings, no marks indicating another direction. Dead end! Antoine's voice carried an edge of panic. Julien ran his hands across the wall, searching for hidden seams or concealed hatches. Nothing. Just solid stone. He checked the marks that had led them here. The last symbol was a cross with an upward arrow, not pointing forward, pointing up. He aimed his flashlight at the ceiling. There, a narrow fissure, maybe 18 inches wide, cutting upward through the rock. Natural formation, not carved. The kind of crack that could run for meters through limestone strata. You're not serious. Antoine stared at the opening. Can you fit through that? I don't know. Maybe. You. Julien shrugged out of his jacket and dropped his tool bag. He was broader through the shoulders than Antoine, but he'd squeezed through tight spaces before during inspections. I'll go first. If I get stuck, you go back and try another tunnel. And leave you wedged in a crack in the rock. No way. If I get stuck, I'm dead anyway. At least you'd have a chance. Julien pulled himself up into the fissure. The rock pressed against his chest and back simultaneously. He could barely expand his lungs to breathe. He inched upward, pulling with his arms, pushing with his feet against any small ledge or protrusion. The rock scraped his ribs through his shirt, his shoulders wedged tight at one point, and for 5 terrible seconds he couldn't move forward or back. Then the fissure widened slightly. He pulled through, gasping, and continued climbing. Below, Antoine entered the crack, his flashlight beam bouncing off wet stone. The fissure opened into another passage. Julien hauled himself out and lay on cold limestone, breathing hard. His ribs ached, his shoulders burned, but they were still moving, still climbing, still alive. This story takes time to craft. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Antoine collapsed beside him, coughing. Blood smeared the kid's forearms where the rock had scraped skin away. Julien's own hands were torn up, fingers raw from pulling against limestone edges. He checked his phone. 29% battery, no signal still, but the percentage was dropping faster now that he'd been using the light constantly. We need to conserve this. He switched off his phone's flashlight, leaving only Antoine's flashlight in his own handheld. One light at a time from now on. The passage ahead was wider than the others they'd navigated, tall enough to stand. The walls showed tool marks. This section had been carved deliberately, not naturally formed. More scratched symbols appeared, but these were different. Not arrows or crosses, numbers, dates. Julien traced his fingers over the marks. 1943, 44. These are dates. From the occupation. Has to be. He found names scratched beside some dates. Claude, Marie, Jean-Paul. Resistance fighters marking their passage through these tunnels, leaving evidence they'd existed, fought, survived, or died trying. The passage split again, 4 directions this time. Julien studied each opening, looking for the scratch marks that had guided them this far. Nothing. Whoever had marked the previous sections hadn't mapped this junction. He tried to orient himself mentally. They'd climbed from the metro tunnels, gone through the catacombs, squeezed through the fissure. Direction was impossible to determine underground without a compass, but his instinct said they'd been moving generally northeast. That would put them somewhere under the Marais district, maybe closer to République. Water dripped from the ceiling, not flooding yet, but the sound echoed from multiple directions. The Seine was seeping through cracks in the bedrock, finding every weakness in the ancient stone. Eventually it would fill these passages too. We need to choose, Antoine said. Julien moved to each tunnel entrance, kneeling to check the floor. The leftmost passage showed scuff marks in the dust. Recent. Days or weeks old, not decades. Someone had been through here. Urban explorers, probably. The catacombs were illegal to enter, but that didn't stop people from sneaking in through hidden entrances, exploring the forbidden sections, posting photos online. Idiots who got themselves lost and had to be rescued by specialized police units, or didn't get rescued and became another set of bones for future explorers to find. But those idiots knew how to get back out. This one. Julien entered the left tunnel. The scuff marks continued, leading deeper. Whoever made them had walked confidently, not the tentative shuffle of someone lost. They'd known where they were going. The tunnel descended, wrong direction. Down meant toward the water, not away from it. But the marks continued, so Julien followed. Maybe this route dropped before climbing again. Maybe it connected to a different system that led upward. The passage opened into a chamber that made him stop. A pile of gear sat against one wall. Modern backpacks, LED lanterns, empty water bottles, spray paint cans. Someone's camp, abandoned recently enough that the food wrappers hadn't decomposed yet. And beyond the camp, 4 more tunnels branched away into darkness. "We're in the maze now," Julien said quietly. Julien searched through the abandoned camp. The backpacks held nothing useful. Empty chip bags, dead phone chargers, a soaked paperback book. But one of the LED lanterns still had battery. He clicked it on, and a weak yellow glow filled the chamber. Why would they leave all this? Antoine picked up a spray paint can, shaking it, still half full. Because they got out, or they didn't. Julien found fresh spray paint on the wall near the camp. Tags, usernames, dated 2 weeks ago. Below the tags, someone had written, "Lost, mark your path," in French. His stomach tightened. Urban explorers who realized too late they'd wandered too deep into unmapped sections. They'd made it out. The gear was still here, not scattered by panic. But the warnings suggested they'd come close to not making it. He studied the 4 tunnel entrances. Spray paint marked 2 of them with X's. Dead ends, probably. The explorers testing routes and marking failures. That left 2 possibilities. Water sounds echoed from the right-hand tunnel. Not rushing floodwater. Dripping, flowing. A stream or underground creek, maybe. Following water downstream would eventually lead to the Seine. Wrong direction. But water flowing meant somewhere for it to go, which meant an outlet to the surface drainage system. The left tunnel showed more scuff marks in the dust, the explorer's exit route. "We follow their path out," Antoine said, moving toward the left tunnel. "Wait." Julien played his light down that passage. 20 feet in, it split again. More choices, more chances to take a wrong turn. The explorers had marked their return path, but in darkness with failing lights, it would be easy to miss a mark and end up circling back or going deeper. He checked his phone again. 23%. They'd been underground for 3 hours now. Sophie would be getting worried. School would have let out early because of the flooding. She'd try to call him, get no answer, start imagining the worst. "Papa always comes home," he told her 1,000 times, usually after working late or getting called in for emergency repairs. He planned to keep that promise. "We're taking the water tunnel," he said. "That goes down. You said we need to go up." Water has to exit somewhere. Storm drains, sewers, those all connect to the surface eventually. Following the explorer's path could take us deeper into the maze. We might not find our way out before our lights die. Antoine looked between the 2 tunnels, unconvinced. Julien added the LED lantern to his tool bag, conserving its battery. "Your choice, but I'm following the water." He entered the right-hand tunnel. The sound of flowing water grew louder. The passage descended at a gentle slope, curving as it went. Condensation covered the walls. His boots splashed through puddles. Behind him, Antoine's footsteps followed. The tunnel opened onto a ledge. Below, maybe 10 feet down, an underground stream cut through the limestone. Clear water, not flood water. Moving fast enough to have current but not dangerously so. It flowed into a low opening in the rock, disappearing into darkness. "We're not going in there." Antoine stared at the opening. Maybe 3 feet high. The water filled half of it. The water's flowing. That means it goes somewhere. It means it goes into a flooded tunnel where we'll drown. Julien aimed his light at the stream opening. The water level inside looked consistent with the outside. Not rising, not flooding, just flowing. If the tunnel stayed that height, they could crawl through with their heads above water. If it didn't, they'd be swimming blind into a submerged passage with no air. Julien climbed down to the stream. The water was colder than the floodwater had been. Spring-fed probably, filtering through limestone for decades before emerging here. He crouched at the opening and shone his light as far as the beam would reach. The tunnel continued level for at least 20 feet before the light faded into darkness. "I'll go first," and he said. "Count to 60. If I'm not back, take the other tunnel and follow the explorer's marks." This is insane. Everything about today is insane. Julien sealed his phone in the waterproof pocket of his tool bag, keeping only his flashlight. He got on his hands and knees in the stream, ice-cold water soaking through his pants immediately. The opening was tighter than it looked. He had to lower himself almost flat, his back scraping the ceiling, his face inches above the water. The current pushed against him, trying to sweep him back. He wedged his elbows against the walls and pulled himself forward. 5 feet in, 10 feet, the ceiling stayed consistent. The water stayed shallow enough to breathe. His flashlight beam showed more tunnel ahead, curving gently to the right. He kept going. At 20 feet, the tunnel opened up. Not much, maybe 4 feet high instead of 3, but enough that he could raise his head and breathe easier. The stream continued through this larger section, still flowing fast. He followed it another 30 feet. The tunnel descended slightly, but never enough to submerge him. He stopped and listened. The water sound changed ahead. Not the smooth flow over limestone, but something else. Splashing, falling, a drop-off maybe, or rapids, or the water plunging into a deeper chamber. Julien edged forward carefully. The tunnel ended at a sharp drop. He aimed his light down and saw the stream falling 10 feet into a pool below. The pool drained through cracks in the floor, the water disappearing into channels that led deeper into the bedrock. But across the chamber, he saw something that made his breath catch. A ladder, iron rungs bolted into the stone wall, climbing upward, disappearing into a vertical shaft. Old rungs, rusted, but definitely manufactured, not natural. Someone had put them there. Someone had used this route before. He crawled backward through the stream tunnel, moving faster now. When he emerged, Antoine was pacing the ledge, checking his watch every few seconds. "There's a drop," Julien said, water streaming from his clothes. "Then a chamber with a ladder going up. It's our way out." "How do you know the ladder leads to the surface?" "I don't, but it's better than wandering the maze until our lights die." He could see Antoine weighing the options. The kid was scared. Hell, Julien was scared too. But fear wasn't useful right now. Action was. "We go through the stream tunnel together," Julien said. "The drop is manageable. We climb the ladder. Whatever's at the top has to be better than what's down here." Antoine nodded slowly. "Okay, together." They sealed their phones in waterproof pockets. Julien kept his flashlight and Antoine kept his. The LED lantern went in the tool bag. Then they climbed down to the stream and entered the tunnel side by side, crawling through water that felt like it was trying to steal the warmth from their bodies 1 degree at a time. The drop came faster than Julien expected. The stream tunnel opened suddenly and he was sliding, unable to stop, hands scraping rock as he tried to slow himself. He hit the pool below with a splash that drove the air from his lungs. The water was deeper than it looked, maybe 6 feet, cold enough to shock his system. He surfaced gasping, treading water, and saw Antoine come through the opening above, falling less gracefully, arms flailing. The kid went under completely. Julien grabbed him before the current could sweep him toward the cracks where the water drained away. They kicked to the edge of the pool and hauled themselves onto dry rock. Antoine coughed up water, shivering violently. "I dropped my flashlight." Julien aimed his own light at the pool. Nothing visible. The flashlight had sunk or been sucked into one of the drainage cracks. They were down to 1 light now, plus the LED lantern in his bag. "We keep moving." Julien helped Antoine up. The kid was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Hypothermia was setting in. They'd been wet and cold for too long. If they didn't get to the surface soon, the cold would kill them before the water did. The ladder waited on the far wall. Julien tested the first rung. Rust crumbled under his grip, but the bolt held firm in the stone. He started climbing, keeping his flashlight aimed upward to light the way for both of them. 40 rungs, 60, 80. His arms burned from the earlier climbs. His shoulders ached from squeezing through tight passages. But he kept going because stopping meant dying, and he'd promised Sophie he'd come home. At 100 rungs, the shaft ended at a metal grate. Julien pushed. It didn't move. He pushed harder, bracing his feet against the wall, driving his shoulder against the metal. Something shifted, not the grate itself, the frame around it. The whole thing was loose in its mounting. He climbed up another rung, getting better leverage, and drove his weight against the grate. The frame broke free with a grinding sound. The grate swung upward on one corner, opening just wide enough for a body to squeeze through. Julien pulled himself into the space above. Not the surface, another passage. But this one felt different. The air was less stale, cooler, moving slightly, a draft, which meant an opening to the outside somewhere. He reached down and helped Antoine up. The kid collapsed on the floor, still shivering. They needed a rest but couldn't afford to. Not yet. Julien pulled out his phone. 18% battery, still no signal. He opened his messages anyway and typed, "Sophie, I'm okay, getting out, love you." He hit send even though it wouldn't go through. Maybe when they got closer to the surface, it would send automatically. The passage stretched ahead, wider than the catacombs. The walls were brick here, not limestone. Old brick, crumbling in places, but definitely constructed. A storm drain maybe, or a sewer line from centuries ago. "Can you walk?" Julien asked. Antoine nodded, teeth still chattering. "Yeah, cold, but I can walk." They moved down the passage following the draft. The air grew fresher with each step. Somewhere ahead, this connected to the surface. It had to. The passage ended at a junction. 3 directions again, but this time Julien saw something that made his heart leap. Light, faint, gray, but definitely natural light filtering down from somewhere above. They followed the light source down the middle passage. The gray glow grew stronger. Julien could make out details now without his flashlight. Cracks in the brickwork, puddles on the floor, iron pipes running along the ceiling, old infrastructure from before the modern sewers were built. The passage opened into a small chamber. Above, maybe 15 feet up, a grate let in daylight. Rain fell through the openings, spattering on the stone floor. Beautiful, precious rain. They were directly beneath street level, but the walls were smooth brick. No ladder, no handholds, nothing to climb. Julien searched the chamber perimeter. There had to be something. The grate above was maybe 2 feet square, big enough to fit through if they could reach it. He tried jumping, fingers stretching, not even close. "Boost me up," Antoine said. Julien locked his hands together and Antoine stepped into them. He lifted the kid, arms shaking with fatigue. Antoine reached up, fingers brushing the grate, not quite high enough. "On my shoulders," Julien said. He lowered Antoine, then crouched. The kid climbed onto his shoulders, boots digging in. Julien stood slowly, legs trembling under the combined weight. Antoine stretched upward. "Got it!" His hands gripped the grate bars. "It's locked." "Can you break the lock?" "I can try." Antoine pulled himself up, hanging from the grate by his hands. Julien heard metal scraping, the kid working at the lock mechanism with his fingers. A car passed overhead, tires hissing on wet pavement. So close to the surface. So close to people and help and safety. Something snapped. The lock. Antoine pushed the grate open and pulled himself through. He disappeared from view. For a moment, Julien thought the kid had just left him, gotten out and run, leaving him trapped in this chamber with no way to climb out alone. Then Antoine's face appeared in the opening, hand reaching down. "I need something to pull you up with. A rope or my tool bag." Julien stripped it off his shoulder. "Tie the straps together. Make it long enough." Antoine grabbed the bag and disappeared again. Julien heard him working above, the sound of nylon straps being knotted together. Then the makeshift rope dropped through the opening. Julien jumped and caught it. The straps held. He walked his feet up the wall, pulling himself hand over hand. His shoulders screamed. His fingers slipped on the wet nylon. But Antoine was pulling from above, and inch by inch, Julien climbed. His head cleared the great opening. Fresh air hit his face. Rain soaked his hair. He pulled himself through and collapsed on wet pavement. They were in an alley, narrow, lined with dumpsters. Buildings rose on either side, maybe 4 stories each. Julien could see a street at the end of the alley. Cars passing, people with umbrellas. Normal life continuing while he'd been fighting for survival 300 feet below. He rolled onto his back and let rain wash over his face. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Signal. He pulled it out. 12% battery. Messages flooding in from Bernard, from other crew members, from Sophie. Sophie's latest. Papa, please answer. They said you're missing. Please. He called her. She picked up before the first ring finished. Papa. Her voice broke on the word. I'm here, Julien said. I'm out. I'm okay. She started crying. He heard her telling someone, he's alive, then back to him. Where are you? What happened? I'll explain everything. Just needed to hear your voice. His own voice cracked. Told you I'd always come home. But Julien's relief died when he tried to stand. His legs wouldn't hold him. He collapsed back to the pavement, vision swimming. Antoine wasn't doing much better. The kid sat against a dumpster, head between his knees, breathing shallow. Sophie, I need you to do something, Julien said into the phone. His tongue felt thick. Words came slow. Call emergency services. Tell them where... He looked around for a street sign. Nothing visible from the alley. Antoine, where are we? The kid didn't respond. Didn't move. Antoine. Julien crawled over to him. The kid's lips had gone blue. His eyes were half closed. Hypothermia. Advanced stages. They'd been wet and cold for hours. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, their bodies were shutting down. Papa, what's wrong? Sophie's voice rose in panic. Just call them. Tell them 2 men in an alley, hypothermia, near... He forced himself to focus. Think. They'd gone northeast from Châtelet through the catacombs. The stream had carried them further east. This alley, these buildings, old Paris, narrow streets. Tell them Marais district. Look for the alley near... His phone died. Screen went black. 12% hadn't been 12%. The battery gauge had been lying, damaged by water exposure. No. He pressed the power button. Nothing. No, no, no. He checked Antoine's pockets. The kid's phone was gone, lost in the pool or the stream. They had no way to call for help. And if Julien passed out here, if they both lost consciousness, they'd die in this alley, 50 feet from people who could save them. He had to move, had to get to the street, had to flag someone down. Julien grabbed the dumpster and pulled himself up. His legs shook but held. He took one step, then another. The alley stretched impossibly long, maybe 50 feet to the street, but it felt like miles. Each step was a battle. His vision darkened at the edges. He made it 10 feet before his legs gave out again. He went down hard, palms scraping asphalt. The street was so close. He could see people walking past the alley entrance. Nobody looking this direction. Nobody seeing 2 men dying 40 feet away. Help! He tried to shout. It came out as a whisper. Help! A woman's voice, distant. Is someone there? Footsteps, running, getting closer. The woman appeared, middle-aged, wearing a rain jacket. Her eyes went wide, seeing Julien on the ground. Antoine slumped by the dumpster. She pulled out her phone, already dialing. 2 men, they're freezing, she said rapidly. Alley behind Rue des Rosiers. They're soaked, not responding well. Hurry. She knelt beside Julien, taking off her jacket to cover him. What happened? Were you in the flooding? Metro, Julien managed. Trapped, underground. Her expression shifted to recognition. The maintenance workers. They said 2 were missing. They called off the search an hour ago. Julien heard sirens. Close. Getting closer. He'd made it. They'd made it. 300 feet of water and darkness and ancient tunnels, and they'd climbed out alive. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain and the sirens, and the woman's voice assuring him help was seconds away. Behind his eyelids, he saw Sophie's face, heard her voice. Papa always comes home. This time barely. This time by inches and luck and the scratch marks of resistance fighters who'd walked these same dark paths 70 years before. But he'd kept his promise. The sirens stopped outside the alley, doors slammed, paramedics running, voices overlapping, someone checking his pulse, wrapping him in thermal blankets, asking questions he couldn't quite process anymore. Julien woke in a hospital bed with Sophie holding his hand. She'd fallen asleep in the chair beside him, head tilted at an angle that would leave her neck sore. Rain streaked the window. The clock on the wall read 11:30. He'd been underground for 7 hours. His body felt like it had been beaten with hammers. Every muscle ached. His hands were bandaged where the rock had torn skin away. An IV drip fed warm fluids into his arm, fighting the hypothermia that had nearly killed him in that alley. Sophie stirred, opened her eyes, and saw him watching her. She sat up fast, squeezing his hand. "Papa." "Hey, baby." His voice came out rough, throat raw from breathing dust and shouting in the dark. "They said you were missing. Bernard called and said the tunnel flooded, and you didn't make it out, and they were searching, but the water was too high and..." The words tumbled out faster than she could control them. "I thought you were dead." "I'm sorry." He squeezed her hand back. "I'm sorry I scared you." A nurse appeared in the doorway, saw he was awake, and disappeared to get a doctor. Sophie wiped her eyes with her free hand, not letting go of his with the other. "What happened down there?" she asked. The Seine broke through, flooded the tunnels faster than anyone expected. Antoine and I got trapped, had to find another way out. The doctor arrived, checked his vitals, asked standard questions about pain levels and sensation in his extremities. Everything looked good considering. Core temperature back to normal, no signs of infection. They'd keep him overnight for observation, but he'd likely go home tomorrow. "The other man you came in with, Antoine," the doctor said. "He's in worse shape. Younger, but the hypothermia hit him harder. We're monitoring him closely." Guilt twisted in Julien's stomach. The kid had only been down there because Bernard sent them both. Antoine had followed his lead through every dark passage, every impossible choice. "He's going to be okay," the doctor added, "but it was close for both of you." After the doctor left, Bernard appeared in the doorway. His supervisor looked like he'd aged 10 years since morning. Dark circles under his eyes, coffee stains on his shirt. "Julien," Bernard's voice cracked. "Thank God." "I'm okay, we're okay." "I shouldn't have sent you down there. The weather warnings, I should have shut down operations earlier. You followed protocol. Nobody expected the containment wall to fail." Julien shifted in the bed. "How bad is the damage?" 4 stations completely flooded, miles of tunnel underwater. They're saying it'll take months to pump out and repair. 3 workers didn't make it out. We found their bodies this afternoon." The room went quiet. 3 men dead. Julien and Antoine alive by pure luck, and the scratch marks of resistance fighters from 70 years ago. "How did you get out?" Bernard asked. "The rescue team said every route from Châtelet was completely submerged. Found an old German service vent, led into the catacombs beneath the metro system. We followed resistance markings until we hit an underground stream, then climbed out through a storm drain in the Marais." Bernard stared at him. Resistance markings from World War II. Scratched into the walls, arrows, crosses, dates. Someone used those passages to hide from the Germans. Their marks let us out. Julien paused. "I want to go back, map the route properly. Those tunnels saved our lives. They should be documented." "You're not going anywhere near the metro for a long time," Sophie said firmly. "She's right," Bernard added. "Take time off. Recover." But Julien was already thinking about the route they'd taken. The German vent at Châtelet, the vertical shaft, the bone chambers, the fissure, the stream. All of it unmapped, all of it forgotten. A week later, Julien stood outside the hospital as Antoine was discharged. The kid looked thinner, moved carefully like everything still hurt. "Hey," Julien said. Antoine managed a weak smile. "Heard you want to go back down there. Someone should map it, make it official. It's a legitimate emergency exit." "You're insane." But Antoine was smiling wider now. "When?" "Give it 2 months, let the metro dry out. Let us heal up. Then we go back with proper equipment." Antoine nodded. 2 months, I'm in. The news coverage continued for weeks. The Paris flood became international news. Julien and Antoine became minor celebrities. The maintenance workers who survived 7 hours underground by following World War II resistance marks through forgotten catacombs. But what Julien remembered most was Sophie's face when he'd woken up in that hospital bed. The way she'd held his hand like she'd never let go. 2 months later, Julien and Antoine stood at the entrance to the sealed German service vent at Châtelet. The metro was partially operational again. Bernard had authorized their expedition with strict safety protocols. They carried modern equipment this time. LED headlamps, backup batteries, radio beacons, GPS trackers, emergency rations, everything they'd lacked during the flood. "Ready?" Julien asked. Antoine checked his gear. "Ready." They opened the hatch and climbed into the shaft, descending into darkness with purpose instead of desperation. This time, they knew where they were going. This time, they'd marked the route properly so no one else would have to navigate it blind. The resistance fighters' scratched symbols were still there, waiting in the dark. Julien traced his fingers over them as he passed, feeling the grooves worn into stone by people who'd fought for survival in their own way, in their own time. The documentation took 3 weeks. They mapped every passage, photographed every marking, measured every shaft and chamber. Historians from the Sorbonne joined them, examining the German text and resistance symbols. The marks told a story, dates ranging from 1942 to 44. Names scratched beside some: Claude Moreau, March 15, 1943, Marie Dubois, July 2nd, Jean-Paul Laurent, September 9th. People who'd hidden from Nazi patrols, who'd moved weapons through these spaces, who'd risked everything in the dark. One historian found records matching some names. Claude Moreau survived the war, lived until 1998. Marie Dubois died in a Gestapo raid in 44. Jean-Paul Laurent made it to Liberation Day and celebrated in the streets. Their marks remained long after they were gone, waiting, ready to guide others who found themselves lost in the dark. The city designated the route as a historical site. Emergency services trained on it as an alternate evacuation path. The passage that had saved Julien and Antoine became part of Paris's official infrastructure. 6 months after the flood, Julien returned to work. Not in the deep tunnels, he couldn't face that yet, but the metro needed experienced workers for reconstruction. Sophie made him promise to text her every hour when he was underground. He did, religiously, small price for peace of mind. On the anniversary of the flood, Julien and Antoine went back one more time, down through the German vent, through the catacombs, to the stream that had carried them toward salvation. They carried flowers, laid them in the chamber where they'd found the resistance camp, a memorial to Claude and Marie and Jean-Paul and all the others who'd marked these passages. "Think they knew," Antoine asked quietly, "that their marks would save people 70 years later?" "I think they hoped." Julien touched one of the scratched arrows. "When you're in the dark, you leave signs for whoever comes after." They climbed back to the surface together. Sophie was waiting at the barrier. She relaxed when she saw him, waved. He waved back and headed toward her, leaving the darkness behind. But knowing it was there, knowing the marks were still waiting, ready to guide the next person who needed them. Julien had walked that path, had followed those marks, had kept his promise to Sophie through 7 hours of water and darkness and doubt. He'd go home tonight, have dinner with his daughter, sleep in his own bed, wake up tomorrow and do it all again. Because that's what survivors do. They keep going. They leave marks for others. They remember the dark but don't let it define them. And they always, always come home. The Metro held a ceremony 3 months after the flood. They unveiled a plaque at Châtelet station honoring the 3 workers who died. Bernard read their names. François Petit, 42 years old, father of 3. Marc Rousseau, 56, 2 weeks from retirement. David Chen, 28, engaged to be married next spring. Julien stood with the other survivors, feeling the weight of being alive when they weren't. Sophie squeezed his hand during the moment of silence. Afterward, François Petit's widow approached him. She was small, pale, holding her youngest daughter's hand. "You knew my husband?" she asked. "We worked at different lines, but yes, I knew him. Good man, Careful worker. They said he was trapped near Câtelet when the water came, that it happened fast. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. Did he suffer? Julien thought about the black wall of water, the lights going out, the speed of it all. It was fast, he said, too fast to be afraid. He didn't know if that was true, but it was what she needed to hear. She nodded, thanked him, and moved on to speak with Bernard. That night, Julien couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Francois and Marc and David, about the random chance that put him at Châtelet instead of Câtelet, about the German vent that happened to be near his position, about Antoine following him instead of trying another route. Luck. That's what it came down to. Luck and 70-year-old scratches on stone walls. He got up, found his tool bag in the closet. The one he'd carried through the tunnels still had dried mud on the straps. He pulled out his phone, the one that had died in the alley. He'd kept it, never tried to fix it. The last message still on the screen when he turned it on one final time at the repair shop. Sophie, I'm okay. Getting out. Love you. It never sent, but he'd made it home anyway. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and share it. It helps the next person find their way here.